And Your Excellency, as I conclude, because conclude I must, you are now the elder statesman in East Africa. We know what the legislators must do. We know that they must legislate. Permit me now to use this occasion to address you directly with due respect. When history is written, Your Excellency, I want it to be said of you that as the elder statesman in East Africa, you presided over the creation of an East African Federation. Let it be said of you that during your watch, that is the period during which we had an East African currency. Let it be said of you that is during your watch that we had one East Africa with one president. Let it be said on you. Your Excellency, I look forward to those days, and I'm asking the heavens to preserve me that I may see them. Your Excellency, we are in a good space, and I have no doubt that those of us who are assembled here today will be able to say that East Africans are hungry and thirsty for a federation. Let us be the midwives that will ensure that that is achieved. Let me say that I am honored and privileged to be asked to share my thoughts with you on the subject, the role of parliamentarians in the integration process. When one is asked to deliver a keynote speech of this kind, particularly in the presence of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, who is an East African, as he'll have occasion to tell you, one can be pretty reticent, but I'll not allow myself to be. I will allow myself to share my thoughts by way of going back to the past, but without repeating some of the nostalgic moments that were so very ably articulated by my good friend, the Right Honorable Amanya Mushega. But yet, in the context of what is happening now, it is important to remind ourselves that when we are talking about integration as we are now, we are talking about integration of the post-colonial era. And many will remember that the countries that we so cherish today are the products of a very harsh reality of European powers in 1884 and 1885, which means that the boundaries that we are so fond of are artificial boundaries. And their artificiality has been articulated by the testimonies we have heard from members of parliament who live on the borders of our countries. And it is instructive that even as we were reclaiming our independence, some of the founding fathers of the African nation were very conscious that if Africa, and indeed East Africa, were to thrive, then it was necessary that we act as one. We will remember the very well publicized desire by the late president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere, that the independence of Tanzania, or Tanganyika then, be delayed so that Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania would regain their independence as one country. Those were, in my view, the embryonic stages of the desire for an integrated East Africa. You will also remember beyond the continent of Africa, the conference of the Organization of African Unity in 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and the subsequent conference in Cairo in 1964, where the doctrine of the inviolability of inherited boundaries was embraced in the hope that we would integrate and that those boundaries will merely become administrative boundaries. Those of you who are a little older will also remember that when we regained independence, no sooner had we settled in than East African community, as we then knew it, started the process of integration, which culminated in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania acting and serving under the East African community in 1967. Testimonies have already been given of those golden years. We have heard stories about how good the East African Railways was. We have heard how it was possible for a Ugandan to work in Kenya and how possible it was for a Kenyan to work in Kasese and for a Tanzanian to work in Uganda and for a Kenyan to work in Tabora. We celebrated those institutions. We have been told about the postal union, the telecommunications. We have been told about the East African Airways. We'll remember fondly the University of East Africa, how it was easy for a Kenyan medical student to study in Mulago and for a Ugandan student to study law at the University of Dar es Salaam, and for a Ugandan student to study engineering at the University of Nairobi. We are all nostalgic about those days. We then ask ourselves why it is that recognizing the value of unity as we do and as we appreciate, why is it that in 1977 our countries went out? What brought about the centrifugal forces that saw Uganda go its way, saw Kenya go its way, saw Tanzania go its way, so that we were disunited? Commentators, whether they are politicians or political scientists or just idle speakers, would say many things happened. Some would say that it was ideological differences of the leaders of the day. Some would say that there were forces from outside of the continent whose desire is that we remain in a state of disunity. All those assessments are possibly true. But even after we had lost our opportunity for deepening our unity in 1977, it cannot be denied that the desire for unity and the desire for the East African community always remained alive. And that is why, therefore, when in 1999, the movement to re-establish the East African community came alive, it was at once sentimental, at once nostalgic, at once visionary, and I'm glad to say that it happened in the presence and through the joint midwifery of the President of the Republic of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. He remains one of the midwives at that time. He is the only one who is still alive to give us a true testimony of the thinking of the day. But we who are students of history remember that when we thought about creating the East African community, we reminded ourselves that never again shall we make the mistakes that were made by our forebears, that never again shall we have a misstep, that never again shall we allow ourselves to be divided by narrow interests, that never again shall we allow myopic views to stand in the way of a good project, that never again will we allow the newly created East African community to be a body that stands up in the air without being grounded in the minds and hearts of the people. And it is in my understanding that the treaty under whose aegis the East African community is now rested is designed to ensure that the people of East African community is indeed located not only in the hearts, but in the minds of the people of East Africa. I remember that when I read Article 5.2 of the treaty, the very deliberate effort, which was people-centered, the statement that we start with a customs union so that the people of East Africa would trade without let and hindrance, that we would go then into the next phase of a common market, and that ultimately we would go into a monetary union, and that ultimately we would have a political federation. Those are sometimes described by the romanticists as the four pillars upon which East African community stands. But the question that we are here to ask ourselves this afternoon is, now that we are on the path of unity, how have we performed? Have we learned the lessons of the past? Have we understood where we want to go? Are our people wedded to the ideals of the East African community? Are we moving with jet-like speed to realize the desired federation? Your Excellency, I remember on the 6th day of March, 1997, the former president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, was invited on the occasion of the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana. And on that day, Mwalimu was as enlightened as he was visionary, as he was passionate. He said, "The generation to which I belong made their contribution. We made our contribution by midwifing our respective countries from the womb of the colonizers. In the process, we made many mistakes, but in the process, we also made many things and made monumental contribution to the process. It is the duty of each generation to recognize what their duty is. Our generation did their part. This generation must now take Africa to the next level." Mwalimu proceeded as he was speaking to say, "Whenever I travel outside of the continent of Africa, nobody cares about our Ugandan-ness. Nobody cares about our Tanzanian-ness. Nobody cares about our Kenyan-ness. Nobody cares about our Congo-ness. They only care about our African-ness." And to me, the statement, therefore, is nobody cares about our little countries, but they care about our East African-ness. History has placed upon our laps the opportunities to make a change. And Your Excellency, as I conclude, because conclude I must, you are now the elder statesman in East Africa. We know what the legislators must do. We know that they must legislate. Permit me now to use this occasion to address you directly with due respect. When history is written, Your Excellency, I want it to be said of you that as the elder statesman in East Africa, you presided over the creation of an East African Federation. Let it be said of you that during your watch, that is the period during which we had an East African currency. Let it be said of you that is during your watch that we had one East Africa with one president. Let it be said on you. Your Excellency, I look forward to those days. and I'm asking the heavens to preserve me that I may see them. Your Excellency, we are in a good space, and I have no doubt that those of us who are assembled here today will be able to say that East Africans are hungry and thirsty for a federation. Let us be the midwives that will ensure that that is achieved. Thank you very much, and God bless you.